integrated auto experience. Jeremie is a trailblazer in the electrification of transportation, bringing 14 years of dedicated experience in this field. He has been leading the development and implementation of comprehensive EV training programs for major OEMs such as Subaru, which is one of our clients for over 29 years, and Ford Canada. His lived experience in the EV sector is unparalleled. He co-founded and leads the EV Association of Atlantic Canada. He's designed and launched Next Ride, the award-winning EV awareness and test drive programs, and co-founded All EV Canada, which at its peak was North America's largest multi-location pre-owned electric dealership and service center. Did I get this right, Jeremie? So without further ado, Jeremie, you've got it.
All right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yes. Is everyone caffeinated? Good. I'm super mic'd. Everyone's caffeinated. We're awake. We didn't go out too late. I'm hopefully going to give you lots of energy. We're going to talk about electric cars. I too work for an agency, Integrated Automotive Experience. As Maurice mentioned, we're not an advertising agency. We're a specialized automotive agency. And we go and do training. We do all sorts of things relative to the automotive sector. But I want to give you some insights today of the crossroads that my industry, the automotive industry, is experiencing. And why would you want a car when I have a perfectly good horse? And the idea here of this quote is, when you're shooting a moving target, you don't aim at it, you aim ahead of it. And to be able to do that, you really need to understand the map. Right? You need to understand the landscape, how everything interconnects and works, and you need to understand where opportunities lay. And what I'm hoping that you walk away with today from this presentation, from the next 4 hours of me being on stage, right, Christy, I got 4 hours? I hope you understand not only all of the crossroads, or not understand, but at least get a peek of all of the crossroads that this industry is experiencing on so many fronts. But the main message I want to share is, how can we as agencies transition from a supplier to a partner with our clients? And through having expertise, and sometimes it's partnerships and collaboration, when we bring that extra value, we become indispensable to those clients, to those partners. And that's what I'm hoping I'll be able to share with you today. So before I dive in too much, I just want to check who drove here today, or for this conference. Who drove? Raise your hands. Who drove further than 1 hour away? Oh, how many? How far? 6.5. 6.5. What city?
Hartford, Connecticut.
Hartford, Connecticut.
Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York. All right. Okay. Who flew here further than 2 hours away? Okay, a lot. Who flew here anybody not from the United States that flew in?
We have
Okay, we know there's a winner here. We do. How far? How long was your flight?
13 hours.
13 hours. Okay, he wins. Anybody from the West Coast of the United States? The northern side, Pacific Northwest, a little bit, and then the south, West Coast. I met several people from Florida. There we go. Yeah, some Florida representation. Awesome. Okay, that gives me an idea. I was curious to know who came from where and what kind of examples I can share for context. So first of all, I'm really delighted to be here. I live in Nova Scotia in Halifax, if some of you are familiar with the Maritimes, the East Coast. But most of my career was spent in Vancouver on the West Coast, but I'm actually from here. So I'm super excited to be here. I'm from about an hour and a half away. I was delighted to be invited because I got to see my sister, I got to see my nephew. It was awesome. And Quebec is, I hope you've been enjoying Montreal. It's just a really special place. And we'll talk a little bit about the culture differences within Canada as well. But this is an overview of what we'll be touching on in the next 4.5 hours, 5 hours. No, okay. So the fragmentation of the customer experience. In the transition to electrification, there's a lot of friction, a lot of challenges, and that customer experience is not ubiquitous, it is not even everywhere. And even within generational divides, right, when we look at different segments, even within that, there's very different experiences and subsegments. We'll dive into that. We'll look at the stakeholders of this industry. Dealerships, what's their goals? What's their challenges? What's it like for them to be engaging with customers? And what about manufacturers that have a long-term vision and want to shape their customers down a certain path, and sometimes that has a conflict with dealerships or other stakeholders in the industry as well? How do they get to play a part in this transition? Where are there opportunities for you to engage in that space? And those two things very much impact brand loyalty. We'll dive into brand loyalty. Do you think, by the way, do you think brand loyalty is higher or lower during this transition? What do we think? All right, do you guys need coffee or what? Like, two people will give me a sign of life here. Yeah, the sign like was lower. We'll talk about that. How there's a lot of friction, a lot of challenges, but that also means there's a lot of opportunities. I couldn't really do a presentation on the electric vehicle space without talking about geopolitical turbulence, tariffs. Has it been in the news? Yeah, it's been in the news a lot, and this sector is impacted more heavily than most, or many. Very, very much impacted by this. And then we'll look at emerging technologies. We can't really just look at the past, we have to look at what's coming up. Where are there opportunities? What are the threats? Who's the big behemoth? Right? Who's the emerging, I call it the big monster? China. Not just making cheap products, they're innovating. I'll give you examples of the technologies that are coming out of China that are blowing everything out of the water. And they're manufacturing behemoths. They're an absolute threat to this industry. But within that, there are still opportunities. There's ways to shape messaging. There's ways to reinforce brand loyalty. So that's what we'll talk about. Does that sound good with everyone? Yeah. Okay. So I love to do a bit of a temperature check. I just want to see with everyone, please stick out your hands and tell me, how do you personally feel, whether as an individual or within the context of your role with your work, if you have clients in the space of electric vehicles? Are you all in? You have 3 electric cars at home, or man, I will never own one, or this is tough. I just want to get a temperature feeling. Where are we at? Come on, everybody. Okay, we've got some interesting. No, don't put it down. I'm still trying to see it. This is where we're at. Great. We have a pretty good average here where we have some thumbs up in the back, we have some mediums, a few downs. And that's exactly what I want to hear and see. There's a very diverse experience amongst current and potential customers. So this evolving customer experience, by the way, that background, that was my dealership in Halifax. We were in 4 provinces, and we had something really unique. We did education as one of the core pillars. And we want, I think fundamentally, everybody wants happy customers. Not only you, but your clients. And your clients want, they want to have great brand reputation, brand awareness. Fundamentally, they want revenue, they want sales. We want happy customers. But that experience is very challenging in times of high transition, high challenge, a lot of friction. Essentially, they're looking for having their expectations met. They're looking for expertise, and they're looking for trust. They want to trust whoever they're engaging with. That goes for any industry, really, but the automotive industry, that's a really big one. So, again, I'm going to keep engaging you, making sure you're caffeinated. Who owns an electric vehicle? Please raise your hand. Okay. Who has driven an electric vehicle? Okay, quite a few. Who has never been in one? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. There's no right or wrong. Has anyone never been in one? Anything that doesn't have a plug? Okay, right on. Awesome. Thank you. Has anybody worked on a campaign for an automotive manufacturer or a supplier or related to the automotive space? Doesn't have to be electric, just automotive. Raise your hand. I did a bit of research before, okay? I want to know my audience, and I researched, some of the organizations here, and I had many conversations last night, And for those of you that raised your hand, just name a few of the manufacturers. Don't be shy. I want to hear. I guess you go first. Subaru. Brendan. I'm going to call you up. Not the first time I'll call you up. What's the manufacturers you've worked with? Porsche. Awesome. Thank you. Yes.
Honda, Porsche, Acura.
Okay, Honda, Porsche, Acura.
Jaguar Land Rover.
And is that in Japan?
Japan.
Wow, awesome. Say that again. What are the manufacturers?
Jaguar Land Rover.
Jaguar Land Rover. Awesome. You know what we just did last weekend with Integrated? We did the Queen Elizabeth II, the showcasing all of their vehicles in Toronto. We do a lot of the logistics. So my agency, we do a lot of experiential events, right? Engaging with customers, having brand ambassadors. We'll do a lot of that coordination, logistics, shipping, training, and then positioning the brand, the VIP event. So that's the kind of agency that we do. I do a lot of the training. So I'll go and sometimes do training sessions with head office staff, executives for manufacturers to give them insights into this space. I'll also do training for all the dealerships. So with Integrated, we develop these programs, we train the trainers, and then we execute on them. And I'll touch on several of the points that we keep reinforcing that are so critical in this transition to make sure that the brand is well represented, well seen, and that it's successful in this transition. Often it's the turn up the whip on sales. So for those of you that have worked in the automotive industry, I want to hear, or not in the automotive industry, but with automotive clients, I want to hear if you agree with me. Gen Z and millennials, they value experience over ownership. They're more comfortable with multimodal transportation. You know, in Montreal, it's called Automotive. In Atlantic Canada, it's called Atlantic Car Share. That's the car share platforms, right? In the West Coast, it's actually, what is it in the United States? I've seen one. Oh, nice job. So we'll look at younger generations that they're more comfortable with younger, with more technology. They love the integration of technology. They love the ability to activate their cars on their watch. Those features, it really matters. And their purchasing journey also really matters. How they go from the computer, right, where they're putting in their information and they're looking at the models, and when they walk into the dealership, that they have the exact same information is already there. They want to have that continuity. So far, are you with me? Do we agree with me mostly? No? Yes? Yeah? Absolutely. Okay, great. Gen X, it's a bit of a mix. And by the way, we'll talk a bit about how it's not 100% like that for every single person that fits within that generation. But overall, as a pillar, Gen X, they seek trusted information and convenience, right? They're balancing familiarity with cost. They really value having knowledgeable staff. And then if we look at boomers, they have very high brand loyalty. They really value human touch points, and they're cautious about change, in many cases. Now within that, in my lived experience, boomers are actually a pretty high segment of our customers. Why do you think? Anybody? Why do you think? You're right on the money. What is one of the big barriers to the electric vehicle transition? Cost. Absolutely. We'll also talk about some of the competition that may be coming down the line that is going to upset that space. But cost is a big barrier. So within those boomers, even though they can be very loyal to a brand, they can also purchase a bit more easily than some generations. And we'll see that continue to evolve. But that just means that when we're crafting messaging, in your case, when you're crafting marketing material or videos or things, it has to be adapted to each audience and subsections of the audience. And I know that there's going to be a speaker on Thursday that's going to talk, Perry, about some very interesting data points that they're able to collect with smartphones and to really get an interesting customer profile that's very, very precise to target that customer. But when we go back to, let's say, the transition to electrification, when we go from early adopters to the early majority, early adopters, even the ones that are on the bleeding edge, they were willing to put their credit card down on a car they've never been in, never sat in, never seen, and to have it delivered at their front door. That's not the average customer. Right? When we're looking at transitioning to the early majority, and I didn't know if there was going to be a lot of people from Europe or not on this, because Europe's bit more advanced than Canada, and Canada's a bit more advanced than the United States in terms of adoption. But as we're transitioning to early majority, it's now up to the dealership network to really help them transition to electric. It's up to them whether they'll be extremely successful or not. But that experience, I want us to take a step back and to get into the shoes of somebody who's in a dealership, somebody who's customer facing. It's a very challenging space for a multitude of reasons, but primarily a salesperson is there to make money for their family. And they're usually very good at what they do. But in my experience, it's 3 to 5 times more time and effort to make a sale of an electric vehicle because there's so many questions. Right, and you asked some great ones yesterday of, what's the savings, right? I had many conversations on electric vehicles. Can I charge at home? How much does it cost? Do these batteries? There's a lot of questions. It's a bigger undertaking, and the person that's representing the manufacturer at the dealership, they're faced with all these questions. It is a challenging space to be in, and it's challenging for the manufacturers to develop the right resources to support them, to make them feel confident. Because fundamentally in sales, confidence matters enormously in helping guide that customer through that. So I want to show you a little example of a tool. Now, that's not specific to a manufacturer, that's not specific to me, but I keep using this because a lot of customers are visual. And it's fun. Do you mind just clicking on that link and we can just show how this works? This is a template. This is a big data set from Geotab, and you can use the slider. Do you mind maybe just switching to miles and Fahrenheit just for our guests here, and then just playing with the temperature, and you can see where the blue car is, the distance that's available. That's the range of the vehicle, and how temperature will impact how far you can go. And Esteban, do you mind maybe changing speeds while we're at it? So how far you can go is impacted by how fast you drive, and helping the customer see and understand that. And it's actually different than gasoline cars because of regenerative braking. That's the vehicle recapturing energy as it slows down and recharging its battery. Electric vehicles actually go further in the city than a gasoline car. Whereas a gasoline car, every time you accelerate and then you slow down, you've wasted all that fuel that you burned up to get up to speed. It's gone. The brakes have, gotten rid of it. Whereas an electric car, your brakes don't always slow down the car. It's the electric motor that slows down the car and acts like a generator and recharges that battery. So being able to show that visually to a customer can be very impactful. We can switch back to the PowerPoint. So those are a couple examples of how we're able to guide customers through that experience. And when I say we get in the shoes of the customer, of the salesperson who's dealing with customers, and this isn't just a salesperson, it can be a service advisor. Let's go through some of these questions here. These are hard to answer. These are like genuinely really hard questions to answer. And we see this on social media all the time. You have an electric vehicle and you think you're an environmentalist? Do you think the battery was made out of thin air? You have to mine lithium, cobalt, manganese, nickel, and then you have to refine it, then you have to ship it. How can we possibly be environmentally friendly? And won't my electricity bill explode? Is there even enough electricity for all of these electric vehicles? Won't it cause a big blackout where our cities will not work anymore? Can you imagine being a salesperson and having to answer those questions? Don't these batteries last a couple years and then they cost $1 bajillion? That's a really tough one to answer. And I'll give you one example, since I don't have 4 hours. Too bad. My sessions are usually either half a day or a full day, so we'll try to condense it, but I'll give you one example. Are electric vehicles better for the environment if your electricity has a lot of carbon emissions coming from coal? By the way, in Quebec, you're looking at about 3 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. A kilowatt hour is a unit of energy. Think of it as a gallon of gas or a liter of gas, it's a volume. 3 grams of CO2. Nova Scotia, where I'm from, has way more coal. It's got essentially the dirtiest electrical grid in the country. We're at around 550 grams of CO2. Yeah, that's a lot worse than Quebec. Quebec is hydroelectricity, it's renewable. The average in the United States is around 540 grams of CO2, very similar to Nova Scotia. It's a carbon-emitting grid in the United States. So how can EVs be more environmentally friendly when your electricity is coming from coal? That's a hard question to answer, and you kind of just dive in a little bit. I'll give you an example. So a gasoline engine is actually very inefficient at taking energy from fuel, combusting it to get movement, right? To get the engine to create force to help the vehicle move forward. Essentially, do I have a little laser on this thing? No, that's not. Okay, the energy losses are tremendous in a gas car. They're very, very inefficient. So you're looking at 16 to 25% of the energy that was in the gas tank that gets converted into motion. Whereas an electric vehicle is extremely efficient. You're looking at 87 to 91% of the energy that went into the battery that gets converted into motion. That means that even if my electricity comes from a very polluting sources, I can go so much further with that same energy that it actually pollutes less. And there's a lot of studies that show even if your electricity is 100% from coal, it tends to be about equivalent to a gas car. But there's no jurisdiction in North America or in Europe that's 100% on coal. Everything's getting decarbonized. We're getting more and more renewable energy, getting cleaner and cleaner energy. And as we do that, our electric vehicles pollute less and less. And in your job, tell me if you agree with this, but a lot of the messaging, we want to simplify things. We want to make sure that we're distilling the messaging down to something very, very simple and easy to grasp. This is pretty darn hard to make it into one little tagline. That's why this transition is very challenging. It's challenging to give all the information that's necessary to fully understand that space. There's a lot of misconceptions. It's why it's taken so long to keep breaking myths. And it's so important to keep educating the staff. And I'm going to go back to an example of, what are the things that we did that was quite different? We were cutting cars open. That's a Tesla. That's the little skateboard platform on the top right. And we had components, and we're showing how that works. And we do open houses and get our customers in. And we would do, and Dave Giles at the bottom, he was my business partner. He's an expert on the technical side of things. And it was about giving them confidence, getting them to understand. There's an enormous amount of curiosity. And we actually never spent a single dollar on advertising or marketing on our company in the first 2 years. And we were in the news all the time. We're doing some pretty neat things. That's a glider in that main photo. A glider is a plane that doesn't have an engine. So usually they'll be training junior pilots on how to fly with the glider. And the way you get a glider into the air is you either have a plane, tow it, and launch it into the air, or a vehicle. Get it about 60, 70 miles an hour, and it rockets quite high, about 1,500 feet, and then it can glide for about 8 to 10 minutes. Well, we used our pickup truck that's electric, we charged it on solar panels so that it was true zero carbon, and we invited the media and said the first zero carbon flight in Atlantic Canada. And it was super fun, and it's 2 seats, so we got people to go in, and we got the media there. We're cutting open cars, we're doing some really unique things. But the whole point there was to raise awareness, to keep reinforcing our expertise, and to build a lot of trust. And that was really key. And I'll see us done if we're able to click on that, if I go next, if that's going to start. I'm going to show a little video that I thought was really interesting. Can we hear the sound?
All EV Canada today. I'm Dave Giles. Here we are today talking about charging safety. It's a rainy, blistery day. A lot of people have questions about charging in the rain, charging in the snow, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show some of the safety systems built into these vehicles. So one of the safety systems that they do have is that there's actually no power to the end of this connector. We are plugged into a 240 outlet on the wall over there, and there's actually no power until we actually physically plug the vehicle in. So once we plug it in, then what happens is we have power communication from the vehicle to the connector, turns on the contactors inside the charge box, which then supplies power. And just to show you something even neater, when I unplug this, power is instantly disconnected. I have a bucket of water here. I'm going to dump this in the bucket of water. I'm going to pull this up. It's still wet. I got to shake some of the water out of it. I'm going to plug it into the vehicle, and you can see it will start charging again. Which is really cool because when people are asking about charging in the rain or in blistery conditions like that, even taking a bucket of water while it's charging won't affect the system at all. So you can actually dump it, you can wash your car with it plugged in, and it's not going to affect the charging rate. So we can see that it's still charging normal, is not affected, and if there was a problem with the system, the isolation system would fault it and shut the charger off instantly.
What do you think of that? Kind of neat, right? And Dave's not just, throwing things together. He's a technical expert, and he's the one that helps. He sits on a board coming up with all the federal regulations around safety for the automotive industry. And essentially, you can see how giving that information, that trust, making that salesperson really confident to say, you know what, you can charge in the snow, in the rain, you can wash your car while it's charging. There's tons of safety systems built in, and it's to give confidence to the customer, to the salesperson, to help accelerate that transition. But am I painting a bit of a picture of all the roadblocks, the crossroads, the challenges for the customer, the challenges for those that are selling, the challenges for manufacturers to then be developing these resources? It's not easy, it's a hard transition. And this is happening while there's so many other challenges that are happening in this industry. Powertrain is one. We've seen direct-to-consumer models. In Europe, we're seeing an agency model. North America, in the States, there's very strong state laws for dealerships, pushing back on that. But that's one of the crossroads that's happening. We have technology. We have software-defined vehicles. We'll dive into that in a couple minutes. But I want to give you an example of a disenfranchised customer. So I've explained a lot of the hurdles, the challenges to purchasing an electric car that you really have to consider. So somebody who's gone through that, and by the way, in my experience, the vast majority of clients are purchasing a more expensive vehicle than they have in the past. This is a larger purchase. So they've done all that. They've gone through those hurdles, they've had this car, they're happy, they're telling their friends and family, right? Word of mouth is incredibly impactful in this space. And after 6 months, they get a letter in the mail or an email welcoming them, reminding them to book their first oil change. How do they feel? How would you feel? You bought an electric car and you get an email saying, hey, congrats, you've had it for 6 months. Please book your first oil change. How would you feel? What's that?
It's not relevant.
That's right. Well, you feel disenfranchised. You feel like you're not understood. What else? What else would what would the feelings be of that customer? Help me out here, a few folks. What feelings would you have? Would you feel like you have a stronger tie to that brand and to that manufacturer, and to your salesperson, to that dealership? No, absolutely not. You feel like, oh my God, these guys don't understand me. And that's not the manufacturer, that's at the dealership level where you have automated processes and systems that automatically sends emails out. That's not the manufacturer, that's at the dealership level. And the dealership and the manufacturer have different objectives. Sometimes they're conflicting. They have to work in a partnership to get to success, but they have different objectives. Right? Whereas the dealership will often, they just really need to make their targets, they need to sell. And the manufacturer will take care a bit more of the brand experience, the long-term vision, what's coming down the line, helping shape your customers into a certain path. But that's a really, really tough one for customers. And when we talk about emotions, I have to mention Tesla. In the last few months, has it been in the news for you guys? Yeah, and there's really interesting data that's coming out. And if you look at the top right, that's just since Christmas up until end of April. The top black line is the residual value of the used inventories of Teslas. That's a pretty significant downward trend. And the blue line is the index of the used car market. So at a time where we know that there's a lot of sales happening with the automotive sectors right now because of the threat of tariffs. Some have kicked in, some haven't. And by the way, it's been really hard for me to keep updating my slides. There's changes yesterday for these tariffs, but it's made used car inventory prices go up as well, whereas Tesla values go down. And we're seeing all sorts of creative bumper stickers where Tesla owners are saying, I bought this before Elon went crazy. We see this everywhere, it's in the news, and it absolutely is impacting the brand. There's some kind of grassroots, independent news campaigns in Europe and in North America. People are reacting very strongly. They're reacting very, very strongly, and that has a profound impact on the brand. If somebody's willing to consider buying that specific brand today, And I'll give you an example of Sweden. Sweden is way advanced of North America in terms of cars, electric vehicle sales. Just shy of 60% of new car sales or new car registrations in the country are electric. Year over year, it's increased by 26% in growth for electric vehicles. But Tesla has had 80% drop in sales through that. It's decimating the brand. But just like you, a lot of the emotions that you want to evoke, how people feel, is so critical. And there's some cheeky, opportunities. And you can see Kia in Norway. Norway has a 95% electric vehicle sales. Right? They're the highest adoption in the world. I bought this after Elon went crazy. And they actually had to take that down because Kia head office in South Korea asked them to take it down. But I thought that was a really neat kind of example that there's still opportunities. And right now, brand loyalty is definitely more fickle than before. So there's a few reasons for that. In North America, there's no electric vehicle that's a convertible that's available. But as soon as there will be one, that's a great opportunity to conquest new customers from other brands. And I'll give you two examples. The Porsche Taycan, I mentioned Porsche a couple times, the Porsche Taycan, when that vehicle launched, it was the first vehicle in that price point, hyper sports car, ultra luxury, really, really nice vehicle. Over 50% of those that purchased the vehicle in the first wave had never owned a Porsche before. Right? It was a great opportunity for Porsche to get a new set of clientele. And an interesting fact about Porsche is they've had an aging demographic, right? They're not demographic, but client base. So every year, their average age of their customers has increased, right? Every single year. You don't want that as a brand. Right? Think of Harley Davidson a little bit like that. They have to kind of re-image themselves to get younger customers because that long term can be devastating. And with the Porsche Taycan, when that vehicle came out, it helped drop the average age of their customers by 3 years. It's really impactful. The Ford Lightning, the first electric pickup truck, that one, 73% of reservation holders were new to the brand. Right? And the article that I read that had that stat said they had never stepped foot in the dealership before, never stepped foot in a Ford dealership before they put their money down on that truck. Now, with integrated, we have multiple clients, whether it's Subaru, whether it's Ford, whether it's Volvo, and I didn't get any of that information from them. This was from articles, but it's there's a lot of opportunities to get new influence. I'm going to come back to brand. This is going to loop back in, but I'm going to ask you a question. So, by the way, this is a GM product. This is a platform. It's called their BEV3 platform. It shares batteries and the same architecture. But on the top left, you have the Equinox, which is a bit smaller. On the bottom right, that's the larger, the Chevy Blazer, 100% electric, both of them. And then top right, you have the Optique, is it Vistique, Cadillac Vistique, and on the bottom you have the Lyriq. So there's multiple vehicles that are on the exact same platform. There's actually more than just that. But I want to ask you, on that platform, which of them is the best selling in 2024? What do you think? Of all, there's a few more than just that, but give me. Well, there's two of them. Yeah, so there'll be the top left would be the Equinox, bottom right is the Blazer. We've got the $5 bet here for which one for the top left? Anybody else? Blazer, anybody else? Lyriq, okay. Well, it's a trick question, because it's actually the Honda Prologue. We're sharing platforms, and this is really interesting. 2024, the highest volume vehicle sold in North America that's electric on that platform was the Honda Prologue. And that comes back to brand loyalty. So yes, it is fickle. Yes, there is an erosion of brand loyalty. There's a lot of opportunities to have customer conquest, but at the same time, there's an executive from a manufacturer that I've worked with who shared something pretty insightful. He said, our customers are our customers to lose. And Chevy has had electric vehicles for quite some time. A full electric 2016 Chevy Bolt. Right? Even before that, plug-in hybrids since 2010. They've had a lot of products that have been able to satiate their client base. Honda hasn't. In Europe, there's the Honda E, which is a very, very small electric car. But in North America, we haven't had a fully electrified product before. And the Prologue came out, and people have strong associations with brands, and it sold very, very well. It was a really interesting kind of data point on that. But within this transition in brand loyalty, there's lots of opportunities. And when we look at the cost of acquiring a new customer, customer conquest versus retaining one of your customers that is already within the brand, it's 10 times more cost effective. And I'm going to use the example of the service department, service advisors. Service advisors tend to engage with 3 times more customers per day than a salesperson. They're constantly engaging with customers. But let's say, does anybody lease a vehicle that's a gas car? Anybody? Oh, okay, yeah. What's your brand? Subaru, okay. It can be any brand at all. But when you go in, I'm guessing you go to the dealership to get an oil change, right? Of course you go in, and you talk to the service advisor and say, oh, an oil change. But a lot of the customers will have, that's where you'll have these micro engagements. Hey, I heard these batteries in winter, like it's crap, right? Like you can't even go anywhere, you're always stuck, they always die, right? Hey, is it true that after like 3-4 years you have to replace the battery and it's like $60,000? Is it true that these cars actually don't last at all? Right? All these questions, or it can sometimes not even, it can be just a subtle little point of engagement. But that person, the service advisor, is representing the manufacturer, representing the dealership. And they have to be armed with a lot of information to be able to combat those myths and to position their brand's vehicles in a positive light, whether it's the current ones, the ones that are upcoming, and be able to put that in a positive light. They may say, oh, well, I want to stay with gas vehicles. Long term, the brand wants market share in that space. They know long term electrification is going to be a really significant. This isn't a secret, whether it's 100% electric or whether it's 50% of the cars sold in 2030 or 2035 is electric. All manufacturers want market share of that. They want a slice of that pie. So retaining a customer is really, really effective in terms of cost in that transition. And I want to share a stat here, a Canadian stat. This is from the last year, J.D. Power. 52% of Canadians have never been or have never driven an electric vehicle. And the really interesting part of that study was after just one ride, after just one test drive, their willingness to consider purchasing an electric vehicle as their next car goes up by 300%. So when he mentioned Next Ride, that was the award-winning electric vehicle campaign, I essentially lobbied the government. And I got $1 million to launch a public awareness program where we went around the province. And my key metric with the government, my number one thing that I was reporting on was bums in seats. Because it's critical to experience it. There's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of emotions that are evoked through all of that. Through a test drive, because I can give you any sort of stats, but you see a lot of the campaigns that you work on are really curated to evoke emotions. And there's nothing better than a test drive to see, whoa, the acceleration or how quiet it is, how engaging it is. So with that angle, with Integrated, we do a lot of brand engagement. We do a lot of public kind of test drives, or we'll be at different shows and we'll have brand ambassadors. And it's these real moments, how the customer feels, the emotions they feel. Being able to meet them where they're at, being able to understand their myths, knowing how to engage with that, knowing what information to share and how to represent that brand in a positive light. Right? It makes a really big difference in terms of customer conquest, because there's a lot of opportunities for those, I looked at all the different generations, for those that are maybe a bit more hesitant. Sometimes all you need is a touch point and you need those emotions to get behind the wheel, experience it, and see the wow factor of it. And it's extremely effective in that transition. Again, it's those opportunities. So how are we doing for time? I know that we started a bit later. I have a couple ad campaigns. I guess, how am I doing for time? I'm good? I'm good, okay. So if you want to just play that. This is a more context.
Such a night, such a long night. Watch myself disappear. Every road that's wrong seems like the road I'm on. Every side just seems unclear. And I wish I was here.
big family-friendly vehicle, playing on those heartstrings of the family side of things. And we've seen Volvo have some somewhat similar ads for the new EX90, a large family vehicle, really focusing on safety and the feeling of the driver and thinking about their family. So we'll see a lot of advertisements that pull those heartstrings. And some that will show maybe more adventure, more off-road, more winter, more reliability. I don't know, has anyone seen this one with Will Ferrell? And that one was brand visibility. I don't know if we got sound on that one.
The U.S., Norway. Well, I won't stand for it. Never mind. With GM's new Ultium battery, we're gonna crush those losers. Crush them! Let's go, America. Keenan, Norway's out EVing us. What's this?
Oh, it's my daughter's birthday. She's really Irish.
I don't care. Grab an EV, meet me in Norway.
Okay, can I say goodbye to my family?
Nope.
All right.
Aquafina, sorry to disturb you, but Norway's beating us at EVs. Meet me there in an hour.
Can I ride with you?
No! GM's Ultium battery is made for all types of vehicles, so soon everyone can drive an EV. Whoa!
Why don't we all just go together?
No one will. It's probably flying around.
Hey, Norway, listen up, you fish-loving! This place is adorable. Damn it! Where are you guys?
Where, Billy? Where are you?
I'm in Norway!
Norway? You're in Sweden.
Damn it!
So it's kind of fun, a bit more kind of general brand awareness, excitement, getting pop culture references. But we're seeing that in this transition, kind of brand awareness, availability of models, accessibility, that's what we're seeing in the ads. But it's really hard to distill everything that I've mentioned earlier, all the challenges that the customers are experiencing. It's a really, really tricky space to distill down into a quick ad. Now, if I zoom back out, and I'm going to talk about the challenges that are coming down the line, what's happening with our competition globally. I want to talk about China. So that ship in that photo, that's the world's largest roll-on, roll-off car carrier. It can carry just shy of 10,000 vehicles. It's the fourth ship like that from BYD. BYD is the fastest growing manufacturer, not just electric, but manufacturer, period. I've got a bet with a friend, an industry friend, saying, I think BYD will topple Toyota and become the world's largest car manufacturer in half the time that it took Toyota to become the leader in the world. They are growing so quickly. And there's hundreds of manufacturers in China. In fact, I think there'll be a lot of consolidation in the industry, not only for European and North American brands, but China absolutely. Look at some of those numbers. 31 million vehicles produced annually out of China, 10.5 million in the States, 15 in Europe. But China's been exporting this year 6 million vehicles globally. And I want you to look at the red line, the acceleration curve. Right, that red line right now stops at 4.5 million. Since then, it's 6. They're beyond the graph now. And one of the few things about Chinese manufacturing, but also it kind of started with Tesla, is the vertical integration of the manufacturer. Tesla makes their own seats. Do you know how incredibly unique that is? The automotive sector, essentially, you have a ton of suppliers. And the window switches, the window motor, the transmission, the computer, the interface, all of that is suppliers. They're extremely well set up to organize, to meet spec. But a transmission found in a BMW can be found in a minivan because it's built by a transmission manufacturer that meets the specific specs. But when you're vertically integrated, you can adapt really quickly. To COVID, to supply chain challenges, the adaptability is way higher. So we're seeing in China that they have very, very high vertical integration. And what really helps with that is as there's more technology, over-the-air updates, it's called software-defined vehicles, there needs to be really good communication between all different components of the vehicle. And they all have to speak the same language. And that's really challenging. But China has a big advantage there. The quality, I drove a Chinese electric vehicle in 2017, and it was one of the worst cars I've ever driven in my life. And I've driven a lot of bad cars. It was honestly, it was terrible. And then, I'd say about 4 years later, it's been mind-blowing. And there's one big thing that's different in China, and it's policy stability. There's no flip-flopping of governments every 4, 8 years, whatever, that say, oh, do this, you have to do this now. You have to do this now, or oh, we're not doing that anymore. It's extremely challenging to keep adapting and having a really long-term plan for your brand, for your manufacturer to do that. Whereas in China, they said in 2015, we have a plan called Made in China 2025. And they gave themselves 10 years to absolutely dominate the industry. And they did give a lot of support to industry. They were able to give loans to companies that were scaling. Now, is anybody aware of the company called Northvolt? Northvolt? Anybody? Well, Montreal. They just filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They're a European battery manufacturer with some amazing technology, with some really large automotive contracts to supply batteries, and they're building in Quebec as well, in many regions of the world, but they just filed for bankruptcy. They weren't able to get a bridge loan to help them overcome the really big struggles of scaling production. Whereas China, there's a lot more support systems that really support that ecosystem. Another example is, if you wanted to start a new brand in China, you want to have a new automaker, the only way you get a license for it is if it was electric. Since 2015, they wouldn't allow anything else. So there's a lot of things that really help them and support that. And their speed to market, from drawing board to car in the showroom, is unparalleled. So this is a monstrous crossroad. How can manufacturers adapt, change, compete, innovate in this space where there's historic, not just complacency, but it's a really structured environment where there's tremendous disruption. And this isn't just electric. Look at this black line on the side here. This is for European sales. The black line is sales growth for gasoline cars. Diesel, gas, it's technology leadership, innovation, and it's manufacturing know-how. Very complicated, precise manufacturing. And now there's tariffs. There's a desire to keep them out. The only 2 countries in the world that are industrialized countries that don't sell Chinese vehicles, do you know what they are? Those 2 countries are? Canada and the US. Chinese vehicles are everywhere else. Now, there is a trade war, right? And we're seeing this quote from January 2025. Right? They're saying it's a threat to national security because there's so much data. Right? My car, I can tap into the cameras. Well, I can't tap into the cameras on my watch, but I can on my phone. I can honk the horn, I can look at things, the amount of data, the ability to move my car, the ability to do these things. It's a threat to national security, but it's also a threat to the industry. Now, 127.5%, that was in January, went to 145. Now it's temporarily down to 30% as of yesterday for the next 90 days. It's really hard to keep track of this, but it is a really challenging space to adapt. For any manufacturer, where you're sourcing your vehicles, where production will go, where you'll allocate it, it's creating an enormous amount of turmoil right now. We'll talk about some crossroads, some challenges, and how manufacturers sometimes need support, or your clients will need support on how to navigate these challenges. Now, I talked about this 10-year plan, right? The Made in China 2025 plan, and I just want to touch on these battery technology. Where I'm from in Nova Scotia, we have quite a bit of innovation in battery research. The United States actually has a lot of innovations in that space as well, but China is at a different level. And sodium-ion batteries, lithium is a mineral that is challenging to scale. Right now, we're still producing globally, a low number of millions of electric cars. But as we scale to hundreds of millions, this is pretty challenging. But you can replace lithium with salt. It's called a sodium-ion battery, super low cost, really easy to scale. Some challenges around, can the battery go as far? Right? Can you get as much range for the same size battery? But they're seeing some big breakthroughs. This was very recent. This was in the last 3 weeks. 4 weeks. I've been following this, but CATL it's the biggest battery manufacturer in the world. And there's, in the last, let's say, 7 weeks, it's been kind of breaking my brain, the innovation that's come out. So the leading auto manufacturers right now, they'll be, let's say, 250 kilowatt charging. So just think of the number 250. And then they just announced 1,000 kilowatt charging out of China. So you can add 400 kilometers in 5 minutes. So what would that be in miles? Who's good at quick math? 240 miles, 250 miles, something like that, in 5 minutes. 3 weeks later, CATM, actually it was Zeekr, 1,200 kilowatts for charging. And then BYD came up 520 kilometers in 5 minutes. That's like 290 miles, added in 5 minutes. The technology innovation that's coming out is astounding. It's really hard to keep up with. But one of the biggest challenges that's underreported and not talked about enough is software-defined vehicles. That challenge that I talked about, vertical integration, communication. I was having a conversation yesterday with the gentleman that BMW is coming out with a new product in the fall, the new class BMWs, and that's the first time they'll have the full architecture where the communication, the software, all interconnects and having really high efficiency. It's going to take less energy to do the same things. It's going to have less wires. It's going to be lighter. The more efficient it is, the smaller the battery I can have, the lower my cost. Higher my range can be very competitive. And it's very challenging space in the industry. And I'll give you a quick example here with Volkswagen signing this, it says $5 billion, it's actually $5.8 billion now, with Rivian. And Rivian is one of those direct-to-consumer, software-first electric vehicle manufacturers that got this enormous joint venture partnership and funding from Volkswagen because Volkswagen wants their software architecture, their ability to communicate. Very valuable. And I think it's one of the largest crossroads in the industry. I'd argue that it's a bigger crossroad than electrification. This is really hard. And when customers, I'll give an example. Somebody that I know that is a CEO of an agency drives this, German, super powerful wagon, over 600 horsepower. It costs $160,000. And one of the employees just came, had just purchased a entry-level vehicle that had way more features on the phone than his vehicle. He didn't feel great about that. So this kind of wave of technology has it, and when we look at the different generations, sure, there's some that really value it, but that's not for everyone. A lot of boomers actually do really value those features. So the software-defined space also offers a lot of opportunities for you, right? We're looking at monetization of features, right? Where even on used vehicles, you can resell it and add new features. So I'll end it with this. This is a quote from Henry Ford. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So I hope today you kind of got a bit of a peek of the industry, and you're able to read the map and understand where opportunities lay. And as agencies, how can you support your clients to find those opportunities? Who can you partner with to gain that expertise of whatever field you're in, to help guide them to choose the right fork in the road when they're faced with crossroads? All right. Thank you, everybody. This is your chance to ask me questions. Yeah.
What do you drive? What do you think of hydrogen?
Ooh, okay, two good questions. Chris, how much time do I have? Do I have like 3 minutes? All right, well, I have to make it quick. We have 2 electric vehicles in our family. I bought, of course I had a dealership, so I've had the pick of the litter. I have a high-performance Tesla Model 3, and we have a Volkswagen ID4 SUV. So 2 electric vehicles, 2 different makes, and we've been happy with both, but I think it'd be pretty unpalatable for me to buy a new Tesla right now, right, socially. And when we go out in public, I don't necessarily take my car. We take my partner's car, and we take the ID4. No one wants that. I don't want to have my car vandalized. I still think Tesla creates a wonderful product, super, super good product, but there's things about the brand that I don't necessarily like. Now, hydrogen, are you sure we don't have 4 hours? Because I'd love to dive into this. I used to work in an energy research lab. I'm pretty nerdy when it comes to this stuff. Now, hydrogen, I think in very specific places will make a lot of sense. It'll make sense in Japan, where they have a limited electrical grid, limited infrastructure, way more challenging to electrify Japan. It makes a lot of sense there to go for hydrogen. But in terms of efficiency, cost, if you think an electric car charging station, there's not enough of them, and they cost a lot, you should look at hydrogen. And you can't charge a hydrogen car, you can't refill it at home. Whereas an electric car, you can. Personally, I don't think hydrogen will become a dominant technology in the next 20 years in North America. I just don't. For the automotive sector, from personal transportation. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be opportunities, that there will be a certain market share where there'll have to be communication, there'll have to be some activation. There'll have to be some campaigns to support that and to help their clients gain that market share, but in terms of dominant technology. Any other questions? We have another minute and a half. Come on, somebody's got to have one question. Yes?
If you ran Tesla today, what would you do with that brand?
Well, if I ran Tesla, then I would make sure everybody knows that the current CEO isn't involved in it, and I think that would make a really big difference in terms of public perception and brand. I would have a pretty strong messaging campaign, and I would keep reinforcing and what they're doing. Like they have amazing technology. They have incredible employees that are putting out fantastic products and innovation. But yeah, right now it's brand perception is the big problem. That's the thing that's absolutely ruining the brand and could be destroying. Yeah. I think that's it. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate it.
Is this a
They're gonna do a little thing.